The air in the penthouse was thick, charged with a tension that hummed beneath the surface of the opulent decor. From my vantage point by the expansive window, the city lights below twinkled like a million distant stars, a stark contrast to the storm brewing within me. I traced the intricate patterns of the Persian rug beneath my feet, each not a silent witness to the years of our shared life, a life now fractured beyond recognition. Isabella's porcelain doll, a delicate thing she cherished, lay in pieces on the pristine white expanse of our bed. It was a visual representation of my own shattered composure. Each fractured limb, each scattered fragment, mirrored the disintegration of the life I had so meticulously constructed. I remember the day I brought that doll home. It was a spontaneous purchase, a fleeting fancy that had somehow captured Isabella's heart. She'd placed it on her vanity, a silent sentinel watching over her daily rituals. Now it was a casualty, a victim of the unseen forces that had invaded our sanctuary. I felt a coldness creeping into my bones, a chilling detachment that distanced me from the emotional turmoil swirling within. It was a familiar sensation, a clinical detachment I cultivated in the operating room, a necessary shield against the raw, unadulterated vulnerability of human suffering. But this was different. This wasn't a body on a table, a puzzle to be solved. This was my life, my marriage, my very sense of self dissected and laid bare. The subtle shifts had started months ago, almost imperceptible at first. A late dinner meeting that stretched into the late hours, a business trip that seemed unusually prolonged, a distracted gaze that lingered just a moment too long. I dismissed them, of course. I was a rational man, a man of logic. I didn't succumb to irrational fears or unfounded suspicions. But the whispers, those insidious whispers that slithered through the social circles we frequented, began to erode my carefully constructed defenses. They spoke of a connection, an intense, almost magnetic pull between Isabella and Julian, a rising star in the art world. Julian, with his youthful exuberance and his flamboyant charm, was the antithesis of everything I represented. He was a whirlwind of emotion, a chaotic burst of energy that seemed to draw Isabella in like a moth to a flame. I observed their interactions, the subtle glances, the shared laughter, the unspoken language of intimacy that flowed between them. I analyzed their movements, their expressions, searching for the telltale signs of betrayal. And I found them, the lingering touch, the stolen glance, the almost imperceptible flinch when I entered the room. Each piece of evidence, each subtle clue, chipped away at my denial, revealing the stark, undeniable truth. The porcelain doll, in its shattered state, served as a potent reminder of my own vulnerability. I had allowed myself to be lulled into a false sense of security, believing that our life was impervious to the chaos that plagued others. I had failed to recognize the subtle currents that were pulling Isabella away from me, the unspoken desires that were leading her down a path of deception. Now, I was left to pick up the pieces, to navigate the wreckage of a life that had been meticulously crafted, only to be shattered by an act of profound betrayal. The coldness within me deepened, a chilling resolve taking root. It was not a rage fueled by emotion, but a calculated, clinical determination to restore balance, to right the wrongs that had been inflicted upon me. My world had always been one of precision and control. The operating room was my sanctuary, a place where I reigned supreme, where life and death danced to the rhythm of my scalpel. I reveled in the intricate complexities of the human body, the delicate balance between fragility and resilience. My hands, steady and sure, had mended countless lives, rebuilt shattered bodies, and restored hope where there was none. But now, those same hands trembled with a suppressed fury, a cold, calculated rage that threatened to consume me. I spent hours in my study, surrounded by medical texts and anatomical charts, the familiar scent of antiseptic a stark contrast to the turmoil within me. I delved into the intricacies of the nervous system, the delicate pathways that controlled pain and pleasure, the subtle mechanisms that governed human behavior. I researched obscure toxins, their effects on the body, their ability to mimic natural ailments, to inflict suffering without leaving a trace. My mind, once a haven of logic and reason, became a battleground, a war zone where conflicting emotions clashed. The betrayal cut deep, a wound that festered and refused to heal. I replayed every moment, every interaction, searching for clues, for answers, for some semblance of understanding. But there was none. Only the cold, hard reality of Isabella's deception, the shattering of the trust that had been the foundation of our life together. I remembered the early days of our courtship, the hesitant first dates, the gradual blossoming of love. Isabella, with her radiant smile and her infectious laughter, had captivated me. She was a creature of beauty and grace, a social butterfly who effortlessly navigated the complexities of our world. I, on the other hand, was a creature of habit, a man of routine. My life revolved around my work, my patience, my relentless pursuit of medical excellence. Isabella brought a vibrancy to my life, a splash of color to my otherwise monochromatic existence. We were a perfect match, or so I believed. We complemented each other, our strengths and weaknesses intertwining to create a seemingly unbreakable bond. I provided stability, security, a safe haven from the storms of life. She brought excitement, passion, a zest for life that I had never known. But somewhere along the way, the balance had shifted. The demands of my work had consumed me, leaving little time for the nuances of our relationship. I had become complacent, taking our love for granted, assuming that it would endure, no matter the circumstances. Now, as I sat in my study, surrounded by the tools of my trade, I realized the extent of my folly. I had neglected the very foundation of our life together, allowing the weeds of neglect to take root and choke the life out of our love. And in my absence, another had stepped in, filling the void I had inadvertently created. Julian, with his youthful energy and his artistic sensibilities, had offered Isabella something I had failed to provide: attention, admiration, a sense of being truly seen and desired. The realization was a bitter pill to swallow, a harsh indictment of my own failings. But it also fueled my resolve. I would not allow my life to be destroyed by the actions of others. I would not be a victim. I would take control, reclaim my power, and exact a retribution that would leave no doubt as to the consequences of betraying my trust. The city that never sleeps throbbed beneath me, a symphony of light and sound that usually faded into background noise as I retreated into the sanctuary of my penthouse. But tonight, the city's restless energy mirrored my own. I couldn't find solace in the familiar comforts of my home, not with the ghost of Isabella's betrayal lingering in every corner. Instead, I found myself drawn to the hospital, the sterile, predictable environment a soothing balm to my turbulent emotions. The night shift staff barely registered my presence as I moved through the deserted corridors. They were accustomed to my late-night visits, my relentless pursuit of knowledge, my insatiable curiosity about the intricacies of the human body. Tonight, however, my purpose was different. I wasn't seeking to heal, but to understand the delicate mechanisms of pain, the subtle ways in which the body could be manipulated, the intricate dance between pleasure and suffering. I spent hours in the medical library, poring over ancient texts, researching obscure syndromes, delving into the forbidden realms of experimental treatments. I consulted with colleagues, ostensibly seeking their expertise on rare neurological disorders, while subtly extracting information that would serve my own twisted agenda. I observed surgeries, fascinated by the surgeon's ability to inflict pain in the name of healing, to manipulate the body with precision and control. With each passing hour, my plan took shape, a grotesque masterpiece woven from medical knowledge and a thirst for vengeance. I would not resort to crude violence or overt aggression. My revenge would be subtle, insidious, a slow, agonizing erosion of their physical and mental well-being. I would use my expertise to unravel their lives, to turn their bodies against them, to inflict a suffering that would far surpass any physical pain. I imagined Julian, his youthful arrogance replaced by a gnawing fear, his body betraying him in ways he couldn't comprehend. I envisioned Isabella, her beauty fading, her vitality draining away, replaced by a constant, debilitating fatigue that would strip her of her social prowess and leave her a shadow of her former self. The thought of their suffering brought a perverse sense of satisfaction, a chilling calm that settled over me like a shroud. I was no longer the compassionate healer, the man who dedicated his life to alleviating suffering. I had become something else, something darker, something driven by a primal need for retribution. As the first rays of dawn pierced the darkness, I emerged from the hospital, my mind ablaze with possibilities. The city was awakening, oblivious to the sinister plot brewing within its midst. I walked the streets, a phantom among the bustling crowds, my eyes fixed on the horizon, my heart filled with a chilling anticipation. The game had begun, and I, the master puppeteer, would orchestrate their downfall with the precision and expertise of a surgeon wielding his scalpel. The first phase of my plan was subtle, almost imperceptible. I began by introducing minor disruptions into their lives, tiny pinpricks of discomfort designed to sow the seeds of doubt and unease. For Julian, it was a series of seemingly unrelated ailments. A persistent tremor in his painting hand, a fleeting dizziness that struck at random moments, a nagging pain in his shoulder that defied diagnosis. I used my connections to recommend specialists, subtly influencing their findings, planting suggestions that would lead them down a path of fruitless investigations. I manipulated test results, introduced minute quantities of substances that would mimic the symptoms of rare neurological disorders, creating a labyrinth of medical confusion. For Isabella, the approach was different. I exploited her vanity, her obsession with youth and beauty. I prescribed seemingly harmless supplements, subtly altering their composition to induce fatigue, hair loss, and a gradual deterioration of her flawless complexion. I suggested cosmetic procedures, recommending practitioners who, unbeknownst to her, were under my influence. I watched their growing anxieties from afar, a silent observer of the chaos I was orchestrating. Julian's artistic confidence began to crumble, his once bold strokes now hesitant and uncertain. Isabella's social calendar dwindled, her radiant smile replaced by a strained mask of worry. Their growing desperation fueled my resolve, confirming the efficacy of my plan. I maintained a facade of normalcy, playing the role of the concerned husband, offering empty reassurances and feigning ignorance of their deteriorating health. I observed their interactions, noting the subtle shifts in their dynamic, the growing tension between them as their individual struggles intensified. The thrill of the game, the meticulous execution of my plan, began to consume me. I spent hours researching new techniques, exploring the boundaries of medical manipulation, pushing the limits of my knowledge. The hospital became my playground, a place where I could experiment, refine my methods, and perfect my art of inflicting suffering. The detachment I had cultivated in the operating room now extended to my personal life. I viewed Isabella and Julian as subjects in a grand experiment, their suffering a necessary component of my research. The guilt that occasionally pricked at my conscience was quickly suppressed, replaced by a cold, clinical curiosity. As their lives spiraled further out of control, I retreated further into my own world, a world of medical journals, obscure research papers, and clandestine consultations with specialists who unwittingly played their part in my twisted game. The line between healer and tormentor blurred, my identity as a surgeon merging with my new role as an agent of vengeance. The facade of normalcy I maintained began to crack under the strain of my double life. The once ordered rhythm of my days dissolved into a chaotic blur of hospital visits, clandestine meetings, and late-night research sessions. My colleagues noticed the change, commenting on my distracted demeanor, my gaunt features, the dark circles that etched themselves beneath my eyes. I brushed off their concerns, attributing my fatigue to the pressures of work, the endless demands of a demanding profession. But the truth was, I was losing myself in the labyrinth of my own creation. The meticulous planning, the intricate web of deceit, the constant manipulation. It all took a toll, eroding my sense of self, blurring the lines between reality and the twisted world I had constructed. Sleep became a luxury I could no longer afford. My nights were filled with visions of Julian and Isabella, their bodies contorting in pain, their minds unraveling under the weight of my manipulations. I would wake in a cold sweat, the echoes of their imagined suffering ringing in my ears. The penthouse, once a sanctuary of peace and tranquility, now felt like a prison, its luxurious furnishings a constant reminder of the life I was losing. I wandered the empty rooms, haunted by the ghost of Isabella's presence, the lingering scent of her perfume a cruel taunt. Even the operating room, my former refuge, lost its allure. The sight of blood, the smell of antiseptic, the rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor, it all served to amplify my own internal turmoil. I found myself making careless mistakes, my once steady hands trembling with a suppressed rage that threatened to erupt at any moment. My colleagues, sensing my instability, began to distance themselves. Consultations became curt and perfunctory, invitations to social gatherings dwindled. I was becoming an outcast, a pariah in the very community I had once held in such high regard. The isolation fueled my obsession. With each passing day, I retreated further into my own world, my thoughts consumed by the intricate details of my plan, the subtle nuances of their suffering. I became a voyeur, secretly observing their lives, relishing their every misfortune, their every setback. Julian's artistic career, once on the cusp of greatness, now lay in ruins. His paintings, once celebrated for their vibrant energy and bold strokes, became dark and distorted, reflecting his own inner turmoil. Gallery owners, once eager to showcase his work, now shunned him, their polite rejections thinly veiled expressions of pity. Isabella, stripped of her beauty and vitality, became a recluse, hiding from the world behind the walls of our penthouse. Her social circle, once a source of endless amusement and validation, abandoned her, their loyalty as fleeting as the latest fashion trend. Their suffering was my sustenance, their despair my vindication. I reveled in their downfall, my own pain momentarily eclipsed by the satisfaction of witnessing their demise. But even as I savored their torment, a nagging doubt began to creep into my consciousness. Was this what I had become? A monster who took pleasure in the suffering of others? A man consumed by his own vengeance? The city, once a vibrant backdrop to my life, now seemed to press in on me, a suffocating presence that mirrored my own internal turmoil. I sought refuge in the anonymity of the crowds, wandering the streets aimlessly, seeking solace in the ceaseless motion of urban life. I haunted art galleries, observing Julian's deteriorating work with a mixture of satisfaction and a strange, unexpected pang of regret. The raw emotion that once pulsed through his paintings was now replaced by a disturbing darkness, a chaotic jumble of lines and colors that spoke of a tormented soul. I watched him from a distance, his once proud posture now stooped, his youthful energy replaced by a listless fatigue. He moved through the gallery like a ghost, his eyes hollow, his face etched with the lines of suffering. The vibrant artist who had captivated Isabella was gone, replaced by a broken man, haunted by an illness he couldn't understand. I followed Isabella on her infrequent outings, observing her as she navigated the city with a newfound fragility. The once confident socialite now moved with a hesitant gait, her eyes downcast, her once impeccable attire now ill-fitting and neglected. I watched her as she entered a high-end boutique, her once favorite haunt, only to be met with thinly veiled disdain from the sales staff. The clothes that once adorned her with effortless grace now hung awkwardly on her emaciated frame, her once radiant complexion now sallow and pale. The sight of her suffering brought a conflicting mix of emotions. There was satisfaction, of course, the cold, hard pleasure of witnessing the consequences of her betrayal. But there was also a flicker of something else, a faint echo of the love I once felt, a lingering tenderness that refused to be completely extinguished. I found myself drawn to the places we used to frequent, the restaurants where we celebrated anniversaries, the theaters where we shared stolen kisses, the parks where we strolled hand in hand. Each location was a ghost of our past, a painful reminder of the life we had built together, the life that had been shattered by her infidelity. The city became a map of my memories, each street corner, each building, each park bench imbued with the echoes of our shared past. I wandered through this landscape of lost love, haunted by the ghosts of our former selves, the specter of our shattered dreams. The constant reminders of my loss fueled my obsession, pushing me deeper into the abyss of my own creation. I was trapped in a cycle of vengeance, my every action, my every thought, consumed by the desire to inflict pain, to exact retribution for the wounds that refused to heal. The initial subtle torments were merely a prelude, a carefully orchestrated overture to the main symphony of suffering I planned to conduct. As Julian and Isabella's health deteriorated, their desperation grew, leading them to seek answers from a medical community I had already subtly manipulated. I steered them toward specialists known for their aggressive treatment approaches, doctors who wouldn't hesitate to prescribe experimental medications and invasive procedures. I planted subtle suggestions, feeding them information that would lead them down a path of increasingly drastic measures. Julian, his artistic hand now trembling uncontrollably, underwent a series of nerve blocks, each one offering temporary relief followed by a resurgence of symptoms with intensified ferocity. The pain, once localized, now spread throughout his body, a constant, agonizing reminder of his failing health. Isabella, her once flawless complexion now marred by a persistent rash, subjected herself to a battery of tests, each one inconclusive, each one fueling her growing anxiety. I subtly manipulated the results, introducing anomalies that would baffle her doctors, leading them to suspect a rare autoimmune disorder. I watched as they underwent countless procedures, their bodies becoming canvases for medical experimentation. Julian's once athletic frame grew gaunt and weak, his vibrant energy replaced by a listless fatigue. Isabella's beauty faded, her once radiant eyes now dull and lifeless. Their suffering became a source of perverse fascination, a macabre spectacle I orchestrated from the shadows. I attended their consultations, disguised in a medical coat and surgical mask, observing their anguish, listening to their desperate pleas for help. The doctors, unaware of my manipulations, grew increasingly frustrated, their diagnostic tools failing to provide any concrete answers. They prescribed a cocktail of medications, each one with its own debilitating side effects, further eroding their physical and mental well-being. I reveled in their confusion, their growing sense of helplessness. Their suffering was a testament to my power, a validation of my twisted genius. I had become the puppet master, pulling the strings of their lives, orchestrating their downfall with the precision and detachment of a surgeon. But even as I savored their torment, a growing unease began to stir within me. The line between justice and cruelty blurred, the boundaries of my morality becoming increasingly indistinct. The man I once was, the compassionate healer, the man who dedicated his life to alleviating suffering, seemed like a distant memory, a ghost from a life I had left behind. The city lights, once a source of inspiration, now reflected the darkness within me, a chilling reminder of the path I had chosen. The once familiar streets now seemed alien and hostile, the faces of the passers-by filled with suspicion and fear. I was a stranger in my own city, a phantom haunting the shadows, my presence a harbinger of pain and despair. The hospital, once my sanctuary, now became a battleground, a place where my two selves clashed. The compassionate healer, the man who swore an oath to do no harm, wrestled with the vengeful manipulator, the architect of suffering. I found myself drawn to the patients, their vulnerability a stark contrast to the cold detachment I had cultivated. I would spend hours at their bedsides, listening to their stories, offering words of comfort, sharing in their pain. Their gratitude, their trust, their unwavering belief in my ability to heal, served as a painful reminder of the man I had once been, the man I was slowly losing. In the operating room, my hands, once steady and sure, now trembled with a suppressed rage that threatened to erupt at any moment. I performed surgeries with a mechanical precision, my mind detached from the task at hand, my thoughts consumed by the intricate details of my plan. My colleagues, sensing my growing instability, began to avoid me. Consultations became curt and perfunctory, invitations to social gatherings dwindled. I was becoming an outcast, a pariah in the very community I had once held in such high regard. The isolation fueled my obsession. With each passing day, I retreated further into my own world, my thoughts consumed by the intricate details of my plan, the subtle nuances of their suffering. I became a voyeur, secretly observing their lives, relishing their every misfortune, their every setback. Julian, his artistic career now in ruins, sought solace in alcohol and drugs, his once vibrant spirit dulled by a haze of self-destruction. I watched as he stumbled through the city's nightlife, his once sharp wit now slurred and incoherent, his once magnetic presence now repellent. Isabella, her social life in tatters, became a prisoner in our penthouse. Her days spent in a haze of prescription medications, her nights filled with nightmares and hallucinations. I observed her through hidden cameras, her once graceful movements now jerky and uncoordinated, her once melodic voice now raspy and weak. Their suffering was my sustenance, their despair my vindication. I reveled in their downfall, my own pain momentarily eclipsed by the satisfaction of witnessing their demise. But even as I savored their torment, a nagging doubt began to creep into my consciousness. Was this what I had become? A monster who took pleasure in the suffering of others? A man consumed by his own vengeance? The city, once a symbol of opportunity and hope, now seemed like a cage, its towering buildings casting long shadows that mirrored the darkness within me. I wandered the streets like a lost soul, seeking an escape from the prison of my own making, but finding none. The game I had started was spiraling out of control, consuming me, transforming me into something I no longer recognized. The turning point came unexpectedly during a routine surgery. I stood over the patient, scalpel in hand, the familiar rhythm of the operating room fading into background noise. As I made the first incision, a wave of dizziness washed over me, my vision blurring, my hands trembling uncontrollably. I stumbled back, the scalpel clattering to the floor, the sterile silence of the operating room shattered by the gasps of my colleagues. They rushed to my aid, their faces etched with concern, their voices a cacophony of questions I couldn't answer. I was rushed to the emergency room, my body betraying me in ways I couldn't comprehend. Tests were run, scans were taken, specialists were consulted, but no one could pinpoint the cause of my sudden collapse. I was a medical mystery, a puzzle that defied diagnosis. As I lay in the hospital bed, hooked up to machines, my own mortality staring me in the face, a chilling realization dawned on me. The suffering I had inflicted on Julian and Isabella was now rebounding on me, a karmic echo of my own twisted actions. The detachment I had cultivated, the cold, clinical precision with which I had orchestrated their downfall, now crumbled, replaced by a wave of fear and regret. I saw the pain in their eyes, the desperation in their voices, the hopelessness in their movements, and I realized the extent of the damage I had caused. I had become the very thing I despised, a monster who took pleasure in the suffering of others. The oath I had sworn, the sacred trust one had violated, the humanity I had sacrificed. It all came crashing down on me, a crushing weight of guilt and remorse. In the quiet solitude of my hospital room, I confronted the darkness within me, the twisted desires that had driven me to such extremes. I saw the ugliness of my actions, the cruelty of my manipulations, the devastation I had wrought upon their lives and my own. The city outside my window, once a symbol of my ambition and success, now seemed like a distant, unattainable dream. The life I had built, the career I had cherished, the love I had lost, it all seemed like a cruel illusion, a fleeting glimpse of happiness that had been snatched away by my own hand. I was left with nothing but the bitter taste of regret, the haunting echoes of their suffering, and the chilling realization that the game I had started had ultimately consumed me, leaving me hollow and broken. The days that followed were a blur of introspection and despair. Confined to my hospital bed, stripped of my authority and control, I was forced to confront the wreckage of my life. The doctors, baffled by my condition, subjected me to a battery of tests, each one inconclusive, each one fueling my growing sense of dread. I spent hours staring at the ceiling, replaying the events of the past months, dissecting my every action, my every decision. The meticulous planning, the intricate web of deceit, the cold-blooded manipulation. It all seemed so distant now, like the actions of another man, a stranger I no longer recognized. The guilt gnawed at me, a constant, unrelenting pain that no medication could alleviate. I saw Julian's face, his once bright eyes now clouded with pain and confusion, his once steady hand now trembling uncontrollably. I heard Isabella's voice, her once melodic laughter now replaced by a raspy whisper, her once vibrant spirit now crushed by despair. Their suffering was my burden to bear, a cross I had to carry for the rest of my days. The knowledge that I was responsible for their pain, that I had deliberately orchestrated their downfall, was a heavy weight that threatened to crush me. I tried to reach out to them, to apologize for the harm I had caused, but my attempts were met with silence. Julian, consumed by his own demons, was beyond reason, his mind lost in a haze of alcohol and drugs. Isabella, shattered by my betrayal, refused to see me, her silence a deafening indictment of my actions. Their rejection was my punishment, a just retribution for the cruelty I had inflicted upon them. I was alone, isolated in my own private hell, haunted by the ghosts of my past, the specter of their suffering a constant reminder of my sins. The city outside my window, once a source of inspiration and hope, now seemed like a cruel mockery, its vibrant energy a stark contrast to the emptiness within me. The life I had built, the career I had cherished, the love I had lost, it all seemed like a distant, unattainable dream. I was left with nothing but the bitter taste of regret, the haunting echoes of their suffering, and the chilling realization that the game I had started had ultimately consumed me, leaving me hollow and broken. The man I once was, the compassionate healer, the man who dedicated his life to alleviating suffering, was gone, replaced by a monster of my own creation. My confinement in the hospital became a period of forced reflection, a stark contrast to the frenetic pace of my previous life. Stripped of my authority and control, I was left to confront the consequences of my actions. The medical staff, initially concerned about my condition, now treated me with a cautious detachment, their professional curiosity tinged with a palpable unease. I was no longer Dr. Elias Thorne, the celebrated surgeon. I was a patient, a medical enigma, a man whose past was catching up with him. The tests continued, each one a reminder of my own vulnerability, a stark contrast to the power I had wielded over Julian and Isabella. The results remained inconclusive, the doctors baffled by the mysterious ailment that had brought me down. It was a cruel irony, a twist of fate that seemed almost poetic. I, the master of medical manipulation, had become a victim of my own twisted game. I spent hours in contemplation, my mind a battleground where remorse and regret fought for dominance. The memories of Julian and Isabella haunted me, their faces etched with pain and despair, their voices echoing in the silence of my room. I saw the devastation I had wrought upon their lives, the suffering I had deliberately inflicted, the love I had so callously destroyed. Sleep offered no escape, my nights filled with nightmares and hallucinations. I saw myself chasing them through a labyrinth of hospital corridors, their screams echoing in the sterile silence, their bodies contorting in agony. I would wake in a cold sweat, my heart pounding, my mind racing, the weight of my guilt crushing me. The city outside my window, once a symbol of my ambition and success, now seemed like a mocking reminder of my downfall. The lights twinkled like distant stars, cold and unreachable, a stark contrast to the darkness that consumed me. I was alone, isolated, adrift in a sea of despair, with no hope of rescue. The game I had started had spiraled out of control, consuming me, leaving me a hollow shell of the man I once was. A glimmer of hope emerged from the depths of my despair. During one of my sleepless nights, I had a vivid dream. I saw myself standing before Julian and Isabella, not as their tormentor, but as their healer. I extended my hands, not to inflict pain, but to offer comfort and forgiveness. The dream shook me to my core. It was a stark contrast to the twisted fantasies that had plagued my nights, a beacon of light in the darkness that consumed me. Could it be possible, I wondered, to undo the damage I had caused? Could I find redemption, Not through vengeance, but through compassion? The thought was terrifying, a radical departure from the path I had been on for so long. It would require me to confront my own demons, to acknowledge my guilt, to seek forgiveness from those I had wronged. It would mean relinquishing the control I had so desperately clung to, surrendering to a force greater than my own twisted desires. But the dream lingered, a persistent whisper in my ear, a gentle nudge towards a different path. I began to question my motives, to examine the roots of my anger, to understand the pain that had driven me to such extremes. I realized that my vengeance had not brought me peace, but only amplified my suffering, leaving me more broken and isolated than ever before. The hospital, once a symbol of my downfall, now seemed like a place of potential healing, not just for my body, but for my soul. I began to engage with the medical staff not as a patient, but as a colleague, sharing my knowledge, offering my assistance. I found a renewed sense of purpose in helping others, a glimmer of hope that perhaps I could still salvage something from the wreckage of my life. The city outside my window, once a source of despair, now seemed to offer a glimmer of possibility. The lights still twinkled, but now they seemed less distant, less mocking, a reminder that even in the darkest of nights, there is always the possibility of dawn. The path ahead was uncertain, fraught with challenges, but for the first time in a long time, I felt a flicker of hope, a belief that perhaps, just perhaps, I could find my way back to the man I once was. The first step was the hardest, admitting my guilt. I requested a meeting with the hospital's ethics committee, a panel of doctors and administrators tasked with overseeing medical conduct. I confessed everything, laying bare the details of my twisted plan, the manipulations, the deceit, the deliberate infliction of suffering. My confession was met with stunned silence, followed by a wave of disbelief and condemnation. I was stripped of my medical license, my reputation shattered, my career in ruins. But even as I faced the consequences of my actions, I felt a sense of liberation, a weight lifted from my shoulders. The truth, however painful, had set me free. Next, I sought out Julian and Isabella. My attempts to contact them were initially met with resistance. Julian, still battling his addiction, refused to see me. Isabella, though hesitant, eventually agreed to a meeting, but her eyes were filled with a mixture of fear and resentment. Our encounter was fraught with tension. I apologized, expressing my deepest remorse for the pain I had caused them. I explained my motivations, not to excuse my actions, but to provide some context for their suffering. I offered to help them, to use my medical knowledge to undo the damage I had inflicted. Julian, when he finally agreed to see me, was a shadow of his former self. His body was ravaged by illness and addiction, his spirit broken by despair. He listened to my apology with a mixture of skepticism and anger, but I could see a flicker of hope in his eyes. Isabella, though still wounded by my betrayal, was more receptive. She saw the genuine remorse in my eyes, the sincerity in my words. She agreed to accept my help, not as a wife, but as a fellow human being in need of healing. The road to recovery was long and arduous. I worked tirelessly, using my medical expertise to reverse the effects of my manipulations. I collaborated with other specialists, seeking their advice, sharing my knowledge, dedicating myself to their healing. Julian, with my help, began his journey to sobriety. He underwent intensive therapy, both physical and psychological, slowly regaining his strength and his artistic vision. Isabella, with my guidance, embarked on a path of healing, both physical and emotional, slowly regaining her vitality and her confidence. The city, once a symbol of my downfall, now seemed like a place of renewal, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. I walked the streets with a newfound humility, no longer a phantom haunting the shadows, but a man seeking redemption, a healer striving to mend the wounds he had inflicted. The healing process was slow and arduous, a testament to the depth of the wounds I had inflicted. Julian, with my unwavering support, battled his addiction, enduring the painful withdrawal symptoms, the cravings, the constant temptation to relapse. He attended therapy sessions, confronting his demons, learning to cope with the trauma of his illness and the loss of his artistic career. Isabella, though physically recovering, still struggled with the emotional scars of my betrayal. The trust we had once shared was shattered, the bond between us irrevocably broken. She underwent counseling, grappling with her anger, her resentment, her lingering feelings of hurt and betrayal. I too was on a journey of healing. I continued to work with the hospital, assisting with surgeries, mentoring young doctors, dedicating myself to the service of others. I found solace in helping those in need, a sense of purpose in using my skills for good, not evil. Slowly, gradually, Julian and Isabella began to heal. Julian rediscovered his passion for art, his new work reflecting the pain he had endured, but also the hope he had found. His paintings, though different from his previous work, were imbued with a raw honesty, a powerful expression of the human spirit. Isabella, though forever changed by her experience, emerged stronger and more resilient. She found new purpose in her life, dedicating herself to charitable work, using her platform to advocate for victims of abuse and betrayal. Our relationship, though never fully restored, found a new equilibrium. We were no longer husband and wife, but fellow travelers on the road to recovery, bound together by the shared experience of pain and healing. We offered each other support, understanding, and forgiveness, acknowledging the past, but focusing on the future. The city, once a symbol of my downfall, now seemed like a place of redemption, a testament to the power of forgiveness and the resilience of the human spirit. I walked the streets with a newfound sense of peace, no longer haunted by the ghosts of my past, but filled with hope for the future. The years that followed were a testament to the enduring power of both destruction and redemption. Julian, his artistic spirit rekindled, found a new voice in his work, his paintings now imbued with a depth of emotion that resonated with audiences worldwide. He became an advocate for mental health, sharing his story with vulnerability and inspiring others to seek help. Though the scars of his past remained, he had found a way to transform his suffering into strength. Isabella, forever changed by the betrayal and the subsequent healing, dedicated her life to helping others. She established a foundation to support victims of abuse and infidelity, offering them a safe haven and a path to recovery. Her own experience had given her a profound understanding of the complexities of human relationships and the importance of forgiveness. As for me, Elias, I continued to serve as a doctor, dedicating myself to alleviating suffering, not inflicting it. My past remained a constant reminder of the darkness that resided within me, a cautionary tale that shaped my every action. I never fully escaped the shadow of my former self, but I found a measure of peace in using my skills to heal, to mend, to offer hope where there was once only despair. The city, once a symbol of my ambition and my downfall, became a place of quiet contemplation. I walked its streets, no longer haunted by the ghosts of my past, but with a profound appreciation for the fragility of life and the enduring power of the human spirit. The porcelain doll, once a symbol of shattered trust and twisted revenge, remained in my possession, a constant reminder of the darkness I had overcome and the long, arduous journey to redemption. It served as a reminder that even the most broken things can be pieced back together, though the cracks may always remain. My actions had left an indelible mark on all of us, a complex tapestry of pain, forgiveness, and ultimately, a fragile hope for a better future.